Hello, and welcome to Exploring Bridgerton. Today we are looking closely at one visual language of the series. Let us explore what the clothes of Bridgerton Season 1 are really telling us.
It is great to be here, and honestly, describing this as a visual language is almost an understatement. The clothing in Season 1 isn't just background noise or, set dressing.
Mm,
It is arguably the loudest, most opinionated character in the entire show.
absolutely. Yeah, it's practically shouting at you from the screen. And before we get into the hidden meanings and the color codes, I really want to talk about the logistics because I was reading through the production notes and I saw a number that made me just stop cold. I actually thought it had to be a typo.
Let me guess. The wardrobe count.
The wardrobe count. The data points here are claiming that for season 1 alone, the costume team created approximately 7,500 individual pieces. And I'm talking items like hats, shawls, overcoats, dresses, all of it. And that combined to make about 5,000 complete costumes. Now, I have to be skeptical here. That just sounds like a PR number. How is that physically possible for an 8-episode season?
It sounds totally inflated, doesn't it? But when you dig into how this production was actually set up, it starts to make sense, albeit in a terrifyingly exhausted way for the crew.
I can only imagine.
You have to remember, Bridgerton isn't a movie with a 2-hour runtime. It's 8 hours of television. And in those 8 hours, you have these massive ball scenes. You have dozens of background actors,
All of whom need to be dressed.
every single one. And then you have the principal cast members who sometimes change clothes 3 or 4 times in a single episode. So the numbers, they balloon.
Right, but 7,500 pieces, that's not a wardrobe department, that's a factory.
That is exactly what costume designer Ellen Mirojnick built. She didn't just hire a few seamstresses. She assembled a team of 238 people. They apparently called it a city of elves.
A city of elves, I love that.
Literally. They took over this massive industrial space, and you had separate departments. You had milliners just for the hats, a dyeing department, a jewelry department, an entire embellishment team. It was a full-on assembly line of luxury.
Wow.
And the reason they had to do this, and this is really the key point, is that they couldn't rent anything.
Which is standard for period dramas,
Yeah.
right? Usually if you're doing, say, a Jane Austen adaptation, you go to a costume house in London, you rent the Regency collection, and you tailor it.
Exactly. You pull from stock. That's what everyone does.
Yeah.
But Mirojnick and the showrunner, Chris Van Dusen, they looked at the stock Regency costumes that were available, the stuff you see in your standard BBC adaptations, and they just said, no.
What was wrong with them?
It was too beige, it was too soft, it was too historically accurate in a way. It didn't fit the specific Shondaland aesthetic they were building, this vibrant, modern, high-stakes world. So they had to build a wardrobe for an entire town from scratch.
That is a massive gamble. You're basically betting the entire costume budget on the idea that historical accuracy isn't what people actually want.
It was a huge risk. But it speaks to the scale of the ambition. I mean, just look at Daphne Bridgerton. She alone had 104 dresses in the first season.
104.
104.
Wait, I'm trying to do the math on that. That's roughly, 13 new dresses per episode?
And like that, yeah.
I don't think I've owned 104 dresses in my entire life, cumulative.
Most people haven't. But think about what that tells us about the character before she even says a single word. If she has a dress for the morning, a dress for the promenade, a dress for tea, and a dress for the ball, and they are all brand new every time, it signals a level of wealth and consumption that is just astronomical. It sets the stakes for her debut. She's the product being launched, and the packaging has to be absolutely flawless.
So the mission statement for this deep dive isn't just look at the pretty clothes. It's about decoding that packaging. We want to figure out what these 7,500 pieces are actually saying about class, about psychology, and about the story itself.
Precisely. Because in a society like the one in Bridgerton, where decorum restricts what you can say out loud,
Yeah.
you can't just tell someone you love them or hate them in the middle of a ballroom.
Right.
The clothes are doing the talking for you. They're carrying the subtext.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, or maybe the lack of an element, the Regency fantasy concept, because we have to address the historians in the audience who probably had a mild stroke when they saw the first episode.
Oh, the historians were very vocal. Very vocal indeed.
Specifically about the bonnets, or the total lack thereof.
The Great Bonnet Ban of 1813.
Was that a real rule on set? No bonnets allowed.
It was a specific directive from Chris Van Dusen. He wanted a bonnetless world. And if you think about it from a modern storytelling perspective, it makes total sense. Bonnets are, they're difficult.
They're like blinkers for humans.
Exactly. They hide the face. They cast these deep shadows over the eyes, which is terrible for cinematography.
Right.
And frankly, to a modern eye, they look a bit austere. They scream old-fashioned.
Hmm.
By removing the bonnets, you open up the actors' faces. You allow for these elaborate hairstyles that become characters in and of themselves. It immediately signals to you, the viewer, this is not a documentary. This is a fantasy.
It's interesting because it sets the ground rules immediately. It's like the show is saying, we know this isn't 1813. You know this isn't 1813. Let's all just agree to play in this sandbox together.
Yes, exactly. It's what the costume designer called an aspirational look.
Okay.
It's based on the Regency silhouette, the Empire waist, the long lines,
Yeah.
but it's filtered through a very modern, very sexy lens.
And speaking of that filter, I found the artistic inspiration for the show completely fascinating because they didn't just look at old-fashioned plates or historical portraits. They looked at contemporary artists, a painter named Genevieve Figgins.
Yes. And if you haven't seen Jeannie Figgins's work, you should really look it up because it explains so much about the show's whole vibe. She's an Irish artist, and she takes these traditional historical scenes, think like Fragonard or Rococo paintings, and she paints them with this acrylic melting style.
Melting is the perfect word. They look like they were left out in the sun. The paint is just dripping down the canvas.
They are so vibrant, highly saturated, but the faces are sometimes blurred or ghoulish, and the colors bleed into each other. It's sort of macabre, but also candy-colored. And the design team used her work as a color Bible. They wanted that level of saturation. They didn't want the dusty, sepia-toned history we usually get. They wanted the screen to pop.
That explains the fabric choices, too, then, because when I look at a standard period drama, I see a lot of muslin, a lot of cotton,
Yeah.
very flat, matte fabrics.
Which is historically accurate. Muslin was the fabric of the Regency. It was expensive, it was imported from India, and it was very fashionable. But on a modern HD television screen, white muslin can look a bit, well, flat. It can look like a nightgown if you're not careful.
So what did they use instead to get that pop?
They shifted to organza and organdy.
Okay, help me out here. What is the difference between those and regular cotton?
So organdy is a sheer, crisp cotton fabric. It has structure, but it's transparent. Organza is traditionally silk, also sheer and crisp, but it has a sheen to it. It catches the light. And when you layer these fabrics, putting a layer of sheer organza over a layer of tulle or satin, you get this multi-dimensional effect. It reflects light. It sort of glows from within.
It creates that blur effect like in the paintings.
Exactly. Mirajnik described the look she wanted as ice cream sundae or a macaron.
A macaron is perfect. It's got that crisp shell on the outside, it's soft in the middle, and it's always in these bright, artificial-looking colors.
And that layering technique allows the clothes to have movement. When the characters dance, the skirts don't just hang there. They float, they swirl. It adds to the whole dreamlike quality of the show. If they had used heavy historical cottons, the ballrooms would have felt much more grounded and, well, heavy.
It also plays into the female gaze aspect of the show, doesn't it? The show is pretty famous for prioritizing the female perspective in its romance. How does that translate to the necklines? Because they are low.
They are very low. And they are rounded. If you look at strict history, daywear would have been much more covered up. You might have a chemisette or a little filler piece of fabric covering the chest during the day. But in Bridgerton, the necklines are just scooped right out.
Is that just to show more skin, to make it sexier?
It is, but it's specific. It's about enhancing the bust and creating the sense of heaving emotion. It makes the characters feel more accessible, more sensual. It draws your eye to the face and the décolletage. It's a way of celebrating the female form that feels empowering within the context of the show rather than, buttoned up and repressed.
So we have this world established. No bonnets, melting colors, glowing fabrics. But within that fantasy world, there are these really stripped tribes. And this is where the visual storytelling gets incredibly clever. The tale of two families.
The Bridgertons and the Featheringtons.
It's almost like a sports team rivalry visually. You know exactly who someone is rooting for or who they're related to the second they walk on screen. Let's start with the home team, the Bridgertons.
The Bridgertons represent old money. They are the establishment. They are the family everyone wants to be. And their color palette reflects that perfectly. It's rooted in Wedgwood blue.
Now, why Wedgwood? I know it's a type of china, but why is that the specific symbol of status?
You have to understand the impact of Josiah Wedgwood in the 18th and 19th centuries. He was like the Steve Jobs of pottery. He industrialized the process and created this very specific pale blue jasper ware with these white relief figures on it. And it became an absolute craze among the aristocracy. It was everywhere. Having Wedgwood in your home meant you had taste, you had money, and you were part of the modern cultured elite.
So by dressing the family in that specific blue, it's a subconscious signal to the audience. These people are the real deal. They belong here.
Exactly. It signifies stability, class, security. The Bridgerton palette is pale blues, silvers, creams. The word they used was powdery. It looks refined. When you see the whole family together, they look cohesive. They look like a unit that belongs in those high-ceilinged rooms. They're the visual baseline of the show. They're the control group.
And then the Featheringtons crash the party.
The Featheringtons are the chaotic variable.
If the Bridgertons are a whisper, the Featheringtons are a scream.
A very acidic scream at that.
We're talking lime greens, bright oranges, yellows that practically glow in the dark. Ellen Mirojnick called them the Versace of the Regency world.
It's such a brilliant comparison. It's flashy, it's branded, it's loud, and it's maybe a little bit tacky. But there's actually a really interesting layer of chemistry here.
Chemistry? What do you mean?
The colors the Featheringtons wear, those electric limes and hot pinks, were largely chemically impossible in 1813. Synthetic dyes, like Mulvein, weren't invented until the 1850s. Before that, dyes were all natural. They came from plants, bugs, minerals. You just couldn't get a neon green from a plant. It didn't exist.
So when we see them on screen, even if we don't know the history of dye manufacturing, our brains are registering something as off.
Exactly. Subconsciously, they look artificial. They look new. And that fits their narrative perfectly. The Featheringtons are new money, or rather, they are desperate money. They're outsiders trying to buy their way in.
It's peacocking, isn't it? Portia Featherington is trying to sell her daughters on the marriage market.
She is. Portia, who is styled like Joan Collins meets Elizabeth Taylor, believes that visibility equals success. If her daughters are the brightest things in the room, surely someone will notice them, someone will propose. It's a strategy born of pure desperation. The brightness distracts from the fact that they are drowning in debt.
And poor Penelope. She is the collateral damage of this whole strategy. She is always, always in yellow.
A color she famously hates.
But yellow has a double meaning for her, right? It's not just a bad fashion choice from her mother.
It does. On the surface, it fits the Featherington citrus theme. And historically, yellow was actually a very fashionable and popular color for debutantes. It was seen as youthful and cheerful. But for Penelope, structurally in the show, yellow is the color of deceit.
Because of Lady Whistledown.
Exactly. Penelope is living this huge double life. She's the most observant person in any room, but she's hiding in plain sight. Yellow is often associated with caution or cowardice, or in this case, a hidden nature. She's a canary in a coal mine, but she's also the one secretly setting the mine on fire.
I love that. And when you put the two families in a room together, the visual clash is just, it's visceral.
It really is. You have the cool, calm waters of the Bridgertons against the chaotic, acidic fire of the Featheringtons. It's a class war painted in fabric. You don't need a single line of dialogue to know that these two families do not understand each other on a fundamental level.
Okay, so that's the family dynamic. Now I want to zoom in on the specific character arcs, because the show does this brilliant thing where the clothes evolve as the characters grow up. It's a perfect show-don't-tell mechanism. And Daphne is the clearest example of this.
Daphne is the diamond. Her entire arc is about moving from being a girl to being a woman, and her wardrobe tracks that journey perfectly.
So phase one is the debutante. She's in white.
Exclusively white. Or the palest of ivories, maybe with a hint of silver.
Which is pretty standard virgin bride symbolism, right? Purity, innocence.
It is. She is the perfect goods for the marriage market. Her debut gown, the one with the gold embroidery, is flawless. But notice how simple the silhouette is. It's not cluttered with ribbons or bows. She is a blank slate waiting for a husband to come and, write her future on her.
Then we get into the courtship phase with the Duke. She starts wearing the Bridgerton blues, but something happens at the Vauxhall Ball. That's the scene where they make their pact to fake date. Her dress there.
Yeah.
It wasn't her best one, was it?
It was noticeably simpler. And that was a very specific, very deliberate choice by the costume department. At that moment in the story, her brother Anthony has scared off all her suitors. Her social stock has plummeted. She's considered damaged goods, effectively. No one wants to dance with her.
So if she had shown up in a huge, opulent gown,
it would have looked desperate. It would have looked pathetic, like she was trying too hard. The simpler dress reflected her vulnerability in that moment. She was exposed. It made the moment where Simon steps in to save her feel that much more grounded and necessary.
But then comes the big shift, phase three, the Duchess. And this is where the color algebra comes in. This was the moment in my research where I just sat back and said, okay, that is genius.
It is one of the most satisfying little details in the entire show. So we've established the Bridgertons are blue.
Right, Bridgerton blue.
Now we need to look at Simon the Duke. His family colors, the Hastings colors, are red and gold.
And blue plus red equals.
Total.
It's so simple, but it works so well.
As soon as Daphne marries Simon, she stops wearing the Bridgerton powdery blues. Almost completely. Her whole palette shifts into dusky purples, lilacs, and rich mauves.
It's visual proof that she has left her mother's house and her family of origin.
It symbolizes the union of their two houses. She isn't just a Bridgerton anymore. She is the Duchess of Hastings. She was blending her identity with his. And the key look for this is what fans call the gambling gown, that dark, muted purple satin she wears to Lady Danbury's event.
She looks so grown up in that scene. So powerful.
She does. The fabric is heavier, it's a satin, the color is darker, more mature. It signals authority. She is a duchess now. She actually outranks her mother. The clothes tell us that she has stepped into her own power.
So let's talk about the other half of that purple equation. Simon Bassett, the Duke. He doesn't start the season in red, though.
No. Simon's arc is almost the reverse of Daphne's. She moves from innocence toward a richer color palette. He moves from darkness toward light and passion. Simon starts the season looking like he's constantly on his way to a funeral.
He's very goth, very brooding.
He is the quintessential Byronic hero archetype. Tall, dark, brooding, emotionally unavailable. And his wardrobe reflects that perfectly. He wears almost exclusively blacks, charcoals, and dark grays.
What is that saying about him, besides just, I'm mysterious and complicated?
It says he is in mourning, not just for his father, whom he hated, but for himself, for his own childhood. He carries the trauma of his upbringing, his father's rejection, the stutter. He's built this huge emotional wall around himself. The dark clothes are his armor. He refuses to participate in the monotonous season. He stands out because he's a black void in a room full of pastels. Lady Danbury even scolds him for it.
But then, as he starts to fall for Daphne, the red starts to creep in.
Slowly but surely. As he falls for her, the Hastings red begins to appear. We see it first in his waistcoats, then his cravats.
The red of passion.
It is the passion breaking through the armor. Think about the garden scene, their first real kiss.
Yeah.
He's wearing a velvet jacket that, in the moonlight, reads as this deep, rich crimson.
The lighting plays a huge role there, doesn't it? In the daylight, it might look stiff and formal, but in the dark, it looks like blood or wine. It's vital.
Exactly. And then later, when he finally appeals to the queen to let them marry, he's wearing a very prominent red ascot. He is literally wearing his heart on his sleeve, or, his neck. He has accepted his role as the Duke, and more importantly, he has accepted love.
There is one detail on Simon, though, that stayed with me. It's not about color, it's about memory. The green brooch.
Ah, yes. The one consistent detail. If you look closely at his lapel in almost every formal scene, there is a small green enamel pin.
It's tiny. You could easily miss it if you weren't looking for it.
You absolutely could.
Okay.
But the backstory is just heartbreaking. It belonged to his mother. Remember, his mother died giving birth to him. Her death is the catalyst for his father's resentment and cruelty. She's this figure he never knew.
So he's carrying the only piece of her he has with him.
It's his way of keeping the only person who ever loved him unconditionally close to his heart. It's this tiny crack in his dark facade. He presents himself as this unfeeling rake, but he's pinning his mother's jewelry to his chest every single day.
That adds so much dimension to him. He's not just a romance novel cover model, he's a grieving son.
Precisely. And the costumes tell you that, if you know where to look.
I want to touch on Anthony quickly, because while the women get most of the fashion glory, the tailoring on Anthony is fascinating. He just looks stiff.
Anthony is the reluctant patriarch. He is effectively the father figure to his siblings. And his clothes are designed to reflect the crushing burden of that responsibility. He wears dark navy, heavy velvets. But look at the cut of his jackets. The collars are incredibly high.
They get so uncomfortable, like they're choking him.
They force a certain posture. You can't slouch in those collars. You have to keep your chin up, literally. It physically manifests the rigidity of his duty. He can't relax, so his clothes don't let him relax.
And we have to mention the mutton chops.
The sideburns. The legendary sideburns.
Jonathan Bailey, the actor, grew those for real for season 1.
He went full method for the mutton chops. That's commitment.
I respect the commitment, but that must have been a nightmare to maintain.
Apparently it was. But it sells the period look for him. It makes him look older, more serious. It separates him from his younger brothers, Benedict and Colin, who are a bit softer, a bit more boyish in their styling.
Okay, Moving on, I want to talk about the Easter eggs. Because the design team hid these little symbols everywhere. And the big ones are the insects.
The entomology of Bridgerton, yes.
We have the Bridgerton bee and the Featherington butterfly.
Let's start with the bee. It's the logo of the show, essentially. It was in the final shot of the season.
It's embroidered on Benedict's waistcoats, it's on collars, it's on the door knocker of their house. It's everywhere.
On a surface level, bees represent community, the hive, industry, power. The Bridgertons are a busy, productive, tight-knit group. But for those who know the backstory, and for the book readers especially, it's a deeply tragic symbol.
It's how their father died.
Edmund Bridgerton died of a bee sting. It was sudden, it was traumatic, and it devastated the family, particularly Anthony. So having the bee motif everywhere is a way of keeping him present. It's a memento mori. It's a constant reminder that their position, their happiness, it's all very fragile.
So it's a symbol of unity, but it's a unity that's haunted by loss.
Exactly. It's got that dual meaning.
And then in stark contrast, the Featheringtons have the butterfly.
Butterflies are all over them. They're hidden in Penelope's hair, they're in the jewelry, they're even woven into the staircase railing of their very garish house.
And this isn't just because butterflies are pretty and fit their floral patterns.
No, it's aspirational again.
Yeah.
What does a butterfly do? It transforms. It starts as a humble caterpillar and becomes something beautiful that can fly.
It's social climbing.
Exactly. The Featheringtons are social butterflies. They are desperately trying to break out of their cocoon, their debt, their outsider status, and ascend. They want to flutter to the top of society. It fits perfectly with Portia's desperate need to launch her daughters into good marriages.
I love that contrast. The bee is about the collective, about family history. The butterfly is all about individual transformation and ambition.
It's very clever visual shorthand for their core values.
Now, we can't talk about iconic fashion without talking about the Queen, Queen Charlotte. She looks like she's in a completely different show.
She is an anomaly, a glorious, magnificent anomaly.
Everyone else is in these slim, columnar, empire silhouettes. And then here comes the Queen in a wig the size of a small car and a dress that's 5 feet wide.
She is wearing 1770s fashion.
Yeah.
She is literally decades behind the trend. She wears panniers, those wide hip supports, and these towering powdered wigs that were popular when she was a young woman.
But she's the Queen. She's supposed to set the trends, not follow them. Why is she so stuck in the past?
It's psychological. And when you think about it, it's actually quite sad. Think about her story with King George. She is holding on to the era when she was young, and more importantly, when her husband was well.
Before his illness really took over their lives.
Exactly. She is freezing time. She's creating a visual fortress around herself where everything is still as it was when they were happy together. Her look is a monument to a better time.
So the big wigs and the wide dresses aren't just vanity, they're a trauma response.
In a way, yes. It also serves to differentiate her as the monarch. The ton changes, fashions come and go, hemlines rise and fall, but the Queen remains. She is the fixed, immovable object at the center of this constantly spinning social whirl.
That makes her look so much more poignant. It's not just about being extra, it's about grief again. There is so much grief hiding in these clothes.
There really is. For a show that looks like a candy shop on the surface, it's anchored in a lot of loss and memory.
And then there is Lady Danbury, my personal style icon from the show.
Lady Danbury is fantastic. Her look is distinct from everyone else. It's often described as icy and architectural, high collars, sharp lines, rich jewel tone.
And top hats. She wears top hats to walk in the park.
The top hats are key. She wears a mix of masculine and feminine styles. She's a widow, she is independently wealthy, and she is an absolute powerhouse.
She doesn't have a husband, and she very clearly doesn't want or need one.
Exactly. The masculine elements, like the top hat, show that she plays by her own rules. She operates with the freedom of a man in this very restrictive society. She doesn't need a chaperone. She is the chaperone.
And her colors link her to Simon, right?
Yes, she wears a lot of purples and crimsons. It connects her visually to the Duke, showing her role as his surrogate mother figure. She is the one who raised him, who championed him, so they share a visual language of power and nobility.
Okay, we need to move to our last big section, construction, controversy, and legacy. We touched on the bonnet controversy, but there's a bigger one that we need to clear up, the corset debate.
Ah, the great corset debate.
There is that scene in the very first episode, it's seared into my brain, where Prudence Featherington is being tight-laced by her mother. Portia is pulling the strings, Prudence is gasping for air, and Portia says something about how her own waist was the size of an orange at her debut.
And then we see the red cuts on Prudence's back.
It's brutal, but is it real? Is that how it worked?
Well, this is where we need to distinguish between stays and corsets, and between drama and historical reality.
Yeah.
In the Regency era, women wore stays. They were softer, often made of cotton or linen with some whalebone boning, but their main purpose was to create a cylindrical shape to lift and support the bust. They weren't the extreme hourglass, waist-cinching corsets of the Victorian era that came much later.
So tight lacing to get a tiny waist wasn't really a thing in 1813.
Not to that painful extreme. The fashionable silhouette was the empire waist. It sits right under the bust. The actual size of your lace didn't matter as much because the skirt flowed down from there.
But the biggest issue with that scene isn't just the shape, it's the layering, right? Or lack thereof.
Correct. The biggest historical inaccuracy in that scene is that Prudence is wearing the corset directly against her skin. That simply was not done.
That just sounds incredibly painful. And unhygienic.
It would be both. You would chafe, you would bleed, it would be a mess. In reality, women wore a shift, or a chemise, which is basically a long linen slip under the stays. It protected the skin from the corset, and it kept the corset itself clean from sweat.
So the bleeding and the marks we see in that scene.
It was a narrative device. It was not a documentary moment. It was a metaphor. It was a very effective way to show the physical and psychological pressure these girls were under. They were being squeezed into a mold, caged by the marriage market. The pain was symbolic of the societal pressure.
It works for the story, even if it makes costume historians scream into their pillows.
It creates a visceral reaction in the audience. We feel her pain. We understand that this isn't just about dressing up. For them, it's armor and it's a cage.
Speaking of visceral reactions, we have to talk about the legacy of the show's fashion. Regency core.
It was a global phenomenon. It was everywhere.
It really was. I remember scrolling through TikTok in early 2021, and suddenly everyone was wearing corsets as tops.
Sales of corsets skyrocketed by something like 1,000%. Elbow-length gloves, pearl embellishments, empire waistlines, square necklines. It took over retail for a solid year.
But they weren't dressing like actual 1813 ladies. They were dressing like Bridgerton characters.
Exactly. That's the key distinction. They were embracing the Regency fantasy. You saw people wearing corsets as outerwear, over a shirt or on their own, mixing these vintage silhouettes with jeans. It was about capturing that frothy, sexy, aspirational aesthetic that Ellen Mirajnik so brilliantly created.
But I want to dig a bit deeper into why it happened then. Because think about when this show came out, December 2020. We were at the peak of the winter lockdown for the pandemic.
We were all sitting in our homes wearing sweatpants, probably for the 10th month in a row. Life was very gray.
We were starved for glamour, for color, for occasion, but I think we were also starved for structure.
That is a fascinating point. Tell me more.
Well, the world was chaotic. It was unstructured. Time felt like a blur. Days blended together. And then here comes a show where there are strict rules. There is a dress for the morning, a dress for the evening. There is social etiquette. There is a corset physically holding you in.
So do you think the obsession with corsets, with that feeling of being held and contained, was a psychological response to the chaos of the outside world?
I think it's very likely. We wanted to feel contained. We wanted occasion. Bridgerton offered a world where people dressed up just to go to the drawing room.
It was the ultimate form of escapism. We didn't just want to watch the story. We wanted to inhabit that feeling of structure and purpose.
It was like cottagecore, but with more money and way more parties.
Exactly. It was a way of reclaiming some sense of occasion in a life that had become profoundly monotonous.
So bringing it all together, we've looked at the incredible scale, the city of elves. We've broken down the color coding, the artificial chemicals of the Featheringtons versus the historic china of the Bridgertons. We've looked at the hidden grief in the queen's wigs and the duke's brooch. What does this all mean for the show?
It means that the costumes are a silent script. They are telling you the story before the actors even open their mouths. The clash of Bridgerton blue and Featherington citrus isn't just a pretty aesthetic choice. It is a class war painted in fabric.
And the central love story of Daphne and Simon is literally woven into the fibers of their clothes. They start as separate entities, white and black, and they end up as a unified purple.
It creates a subconscious emotional journey for the viewer. You might not notice the purple consciously on first watch, but your brain registers the harmony, the unity. It makes their ending feel so earned and complete.
It is masterful storytelling on every level. And here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over. We talked about how we all rushed to buy corsets during the pandemic because we craved that structure and escapism. But if the costumes in Bridgerton are largely about women navigating a restrictive, patriarchal society, literally binding themselves to fit in, what does it say about us that we found that specific aesthetic so comforting in a moment of crisis?
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
Perhaps it suggests that in a world where we felt we had absolutely no control, we were willing to trade a little bit of our modern freedom for the fantasy of a world where everything and everyone has a clear, defined, and beautiful place.
That is a thought that will definitely keep me up tonight. That was our look at the fashion of Bridgerton Season 1. Every color, fabric, and silhouette has something to say. Join us next time as we continue exploring Bridgerton one detail at a time.